Welcome to Into the Woo, a wellness podcast hosted by Alice Hu. I'll be exploring the world of crystals, energy healing, spirit guides, and more to help you understand how they can unlock your potential. These concepts have helped me discover my purpose and my truth, and I can't wait to hear how they will inspire you. I'll show you how they can be accessible and powerful tools in your life. I used to love eating out, trying out new restaurants, new cuisines. But, the last few years, things have dramatically shifted for me as I've started to view food as fuel, understanding that what I eat is really going to affect how I feel, my work outputs, and so much more. And what I've come to realize is understanding when I eat certain foods might make me feel sluggish or tired, and really moving more plant-based and eating organic as much as possible. And I've noticed just that I feel better. So it's not to say that I don't eat out and that I don't indulge in the foods that I loved before, but I'm much more mindful about what I put into my body. I met Kris and Yasir a couple months ago through an Instagram challenge that they hosted to really build immunity. They are the founders of Lumen. Lumen produces organic cold-pressed hemp shots. We talked about the benefits of hemp juice, why you should be choosing a cold-pressed juice, eating healthy as an entrepreneur, and why they decided to not pursue medical school and to carve a different path for themselves by creating a wellness product business. I really enjoyed chatting with them. I have a feeling that you'll learn a lot on this episode.
Thanks for having us on the podcast. We're really excited to be here. This is Kris speaking, and we started Lumen with a third partner, Jacob, and the three of us all came together around this concept that food is medicine. And it's not just the food you put into your body itself, but it's also how that food is grown. And so when you use regenerative farming or farming that's good for the planet, it actually makes food that's healthier for you. And so it's this concept of food being medicine, not only for people, but also for the planet, which in turn, of course, comes back and heals people. So it's this holistic vision. And Jacob had this idea that while he was a professional skier for a long time, banged up his body a whole bunch. And in the off seasons, when it wasn't snowy in the US, he wasn't traveling across the world, he would work on farms and use permaculture principles or organic farming and convert farms from industrial farming, conventional farming to organic farming. And some of those farms were hemp farms. And so he started looking at the plant and he was like, I wonder why people just aren't eating this like a vegetable. Like this has been around for people have been using CBD, for instance, for over 12,000 years. Why aren't people just eating the plant? So he starts eating the leaves and feels amazing. His body felt great. His mind felt clear. But he was like, I can't keep up with the amount of leaves I want to eat. I'd have to have hemp salads all day, and they're kind of rough. They're kind of fibrous and tough and slightly irritating to the throat. So he started juicing the plant, and he had this magical discovery that hemp juice was this undiscovered potential for helping people with their inflammation and their clarity of mind and their stress. And so he had this kind of hidden gem of an idea, and he was looking for some help to start the company. And Yasir and I had left medical school to pursue this belief that food is medicine, and we all crossed paths at the same time. Oddly enough, at a organic farming conference that our farmer Chris was organizing. So it all came around this concept of food being medicine, and including how that food is produced.
And what did you guys do before starting this business? Tell me a little bit more about how you got into the field of medicine, but then left it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me personally, this is Yasir speaking. I was always kind of on the path to become a physician. I come from a family of physicians. And so before Lumen, I'd actually met Kris back in middle school, known him for a long time now. And so we went to middle school together, high school together, became good friends in high school and ended up going to college together. So we were roommates in college and really just helped each other grow and build. And that's where my passion for the environment started through a couple projects there. And I just didn't know much about all the climate crisis that was happening. And so it became kind of like a personal passion, and I was still always focused on wanting to become a physician. And so after college, I went to get my master's in neuroscience. I was always passionate about the brain, and had my undergraduate in psychology. And that was kind of the future that I saw for myself. Was I want to pursue medicine, but I always want it to be something that has to do with the brain. And I was always fascinated about what made me and what made you. And I was passionate about consciousness and human beings and just general, what makes us human and why do we act the way that we act? And if I could start to get an understanding of that, we could start to figure out how do we change behavior for the better of the world. And so that was what I was passionate about. And so I did my master's, and during my master's, Kris was working on a startup in Texas for CBD in patients with epilepsy. And so he reached out and sent, some decks and some research my way. And I started to look at finding ways to help him. And that's where my passion, outside of medicine started to grow. And I realized that medicine was this kind of like big, slow machine that was doing a lot of good in the world, but I was also leaving a lot of gaps, and there were a lot of people suffering because of it. And so the more that I started to understand the world, and the more that I started to understand not only medicine, but the whole healthcare system, the more I found out that maybe it isn't the passion that I'm really looking for. And so the startup became Kris's idea, and startup became a little bit of my own, and we put some ideas together and had a startup together. And that one didn't work out so well as many do in the world. And but it was a lot of fun, and it was a huge learning experience. And we learned a lot about not just business, but politics and everything else that comes around building something, right, from an idea to a product or to a company. And so that was good fun. And from there, when that project fell apart, Lumen just happened to fall into our laps. It was kind of like a right time, right place thing when we were discovering, trying to figure out what's the next step in our lives. I think at the time I had a deferral for medical school. So there were a few months left before I had to kind of say, yes, I'm coming, or no, I'm not. And Lumen kind of fell right in that window. And so it was a right time, right place thing. And we kind of hopped on, and it's been an exciting journey ever since.
Yeah, that deferral for medical school is kind of a weird period, because it's kind of like you're engaged. We both deferred medical school because we both kind of had the blinders, quote unquote, lifted off. Both wanted to be physicians since middle school. And when you see the way the system currently works, we could dive into this more if you'd like, but that deferral period, you feel like you're about to get married. And it was weird because both of us essentially broke our engagements to what our, most of our life had been devoted to. We were still kids, and we were very privileged to be exposed to the medical field in the way we were while we were younger. But we broke that engagement, and it takes an emotional toll on you, but it was also very reassuring knowing that there are these gaps that we wanted to fill. When you look at bridging Eastern and Western philosophy, there's a small field called functional medicine. Leaders like Dr. Mark Hyman are really leading that and pushing that forward, which is great. But there's really not a lot of people bridging that Eastern and Western philosophy gap. And our ability to change things through business looked a lot more exciting because we could create these systems that had reverberating or butterfly effects that could reach into how things are farmed using regenerative farming, could reach into changing culture through making something that's kind of cool for people to talk about. And that's how we met you, Alice, through one of those projects, which was our 9-day immune reset challenge. So it's all come together quite well. And we still feel like we're practicing medicine. But the way we practice medicine, we believe, is between doctor's visits as opposed to at the doctor's office itself.
Yeah, and there is that quote from Hippocrates that says, "Let food be thine medicine."
Yes, he couldn't have said it better. It's famous, and it's a good one. We truly believe it.
And it's from such a long time ago as well. And so I wanted to go back and ask, how you guys felt in that, like you said, that weird engagement period where you were like, I'm going to be a doctor. This is something that I have wanted since childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that completely shifted and changed. And how did you feel? And how did you respond to that situation and kind of move past that to create, honestly, a new reality for yourself and a new life? It can be very jarring. You're like, for let's say 10 years, you're like, this is what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I actually don't want to do this.
Yeah, it was stressful. Definitely stressful. I'll let Yasir share his little bit because I know it's a slightly different experience with his family background. But with my family, I know the deferral was a little bit easier of a way to, because I kind of knew before I deferred medical school, I was like, I kind of want to go into something related to the environment. And then I ended up discovering regenerative farming and figuring out you could link the environment or the way things are farmed with human health. So that took me down a different path. But you feel like you are, like you look in the mirror and you're like, the person you see is no longer the person that you saw a year ago. And it's kind of weird because you at least for me, I almost didn't recognize myself completely, which sounds like overly dramatic. I'm sure other people have an easier time with it, but for me, it was such an ingrained part of my identity. Yasir and I both went through this program called Clinical Rotations in our high school in Plano, Texas, which was, again, a really privileged program. We were fortunate to go through that. And we got our certified nursing assistant licenses in high school, and we went through the path for pharmacy technician licensing and all these things that we could do as children, essentially, teenagers, young adults. And we got exposed by shadowing different types of physicians day in and day out for 2 years. And then a lot of us continue that through college. And so you kind of feel like you're already a part of it. And so this kind of clear-cut path where if you follow the steps, you connect the dots, you're going to end up at a quote-unquote successful, stable, respected position in society, which for me, it was less like the position, but it was more like feeling super valuable because whatever I need to do in life, I have to have it be valuable for other people. Like that's just fulfillment 101 for me. So for me, it kind of felt like I was abandoning that for something that was very uncertain. And it's still, you still think about it every once in a while. All of our friends right now are in the residencies. A lot of them are surgeons or mostly surgeons actually. And so seeing what they're going through, it's actually kind of reassuring because the flaws that we saw in the system, they see it too. And their motivations are different. So they're able to still push through it and really enjoy it. But I know for a fact that I made the right decision. I know Yasir's background with your family, you can provide a little background on that's different.
Yeah, it's just different culturally because there's so much weight, you make so many people proud and then you have to take that burden on top of, and it's the extended family is so connected. So it's not just, mom and dad and the brothers and sisters, but it's the aunts, the uncles, the grandmas, the grandpas. So it's more of a mountain to climb and then to reach the other side kind of in your head and deciding that, okay, this is the path that I want to take for my life. But I think one of the things that helped me get over it was realizing that it's kind of like the airplane analogy where it's you put your mask on before you put your kid's mask on or the mask on for the person next to you. And so I used to always think that if I wanted to do something that I was really passionate about and I could become successful, I could now become a beacon of hope for everyone in my culture and in my community that have always wanted to find a different path or follow a different path. So that was one thing that kind of helped conquer the fear for me personally, was realizing that, wait, this is something I'm passionate about. How many other people like me also have a passion outside of this path that they might think that they're destined on and just never chose to pursue it because, of family pressure, because they felt like what they were doing was the right thing to do when there were so many other opportunities.
The saying I heard when I first decided to leave medical school behind was, you could be a tugboat or you could be a lighthouse. And you can only be a tugboat for one boat at a time. But if you choose to build and use these different tools to be the lighthouse, you can guide a lot more people to the vision that you see.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And because you're doing something different, you're offering a different product in the market. Like, what do you say to friends, family, just people that you meet about Lumen, about the hemp juice, and why is it something great to incorporate in your diet? And also, kind of, what type of pushback have you received as well?
Yeah, the hemp juice is definitely the main differentiator for Lumen. It's like the big thing that we did different. Now we use different parts of the hemp plant and different beverages, including things like hemp seed oil, which I'm really excited about because the vast majority of Americans are deficient in omega-3. Hemp seed oil has a perfect ratio of omega-3, 6, and 9 for the human body in a plant-based form, super sustainable. So back to the hemp juice. I mean, that hemp juice was the first big thing to set us apart. And that's kind of what gave us our ability to launch and excitement around what we were doing. And even still to this day, we're the only company in the world producing a beverage sold in things like grocery stores or online made with cold pressed hemp juice. And that's mind-boggling to me because this plant has been around for so long. We're definitely not the only ones juicing it. There are other companies out there juicing it. There are other people out there juicing it at home, which is a lot harder than it sounds. It'll destroy your home juicer really quickly. And so it's exciting to see that other people are picking up on this because the juice from the plant, from a medical perspective, it's different than all of the other CBD products out there in the world. So CBD is kind of everywhere. I'm sure, especially if you've been following along with Alice and all of her work, she's so in tune with wellness. You've probably also been exposed to CBD everything. Even if you're not in tune with wellness, you probably have been exposed to CBD everything. And the cool part about juicing hemp is instead of getting CBD out of it, you get something called CBDA or raw CBD. And for us, raw is better. So this raw CBD, the same researcher that discovered that regular CBD works well for things like stress and inflammation back in the 80s, recently discovered that raw CBD, what's in hemp juice, can work up to 1,000 times stronger than regular CBD for things like nausea and gut inflammation. And it still works well for overall inflammation in the body and stress and sleep regulation. So it's kind of cool when you see this more natural form of a product or a plant, an ingredient, actually work better than some of the more processed forms. I think we're discovering that across the board. I know this is kind of controversial, but there was a study that looked at cats and drinking pasteurized, homogenized milk versus raw milk. And the cats that drank raw milk were extremely healthy, but the cats that drank the human overly processed form ended up developing all these issues that we associate with dairy. So we're kind of learning, it's this renaissance right now that less processing is usually better. Raw is usually as good as it can get. If you can pick it and eat it straight out of your own garden, it's not going to be any healthier than that. So it took a while for people in our circles to see that though. And it took us a while for us to even understand how to be communicating that because we're scientists, we're not marketers. And so even amongst our closest friends and family, it took us a while before a lot of them completely understood. Shout out to my parents. They're pretty progressive. So they're like, all right, we see what this is happening. We see where this is going. We see the benefit here. And they've been pushing this since we had our Indiegogo and getting their friends to sign up and stuff. So I think our families see the value in it. And now, especially like Yasir said, getting into Whole Foods, our Whole Foods shot, unfortunately, does not have the hemp juice in it, which has that raw CBD because they can't sell CBD products yet. But we created this new specific, it's a revamped line with hemp seed oil that has that perfect ratio of omega-3s in there for the human body. And that's been doing really, really well. And people, it seems like the world wants that a lot, especially in Whole Foods, because omegas are coming to the forefront of conversation. And when you look at the way omegas work in the body, inflammation is the root of a lot of different diseases. And having too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3, you already know this, Alice, I'm preaching to the choir, it leads to inflammatory response in the body. So for us, it's pretty exciting to be able to use this hemp plant in more ways than one. Right now, I'm wearing my Hemp Lumen t-shirt that I'm about to go visit some stores in. And I've got hemp business cards in my pocket, and we've got hemp seed oil in some of our juices and hemp juice in some of our other shots. And so it's this really versatile plant. And this is like a whole nother tangent, but I'm a big believer in the fact that hemp can help us significantly reverse climate change. So this plant has given us a lot, and people are starting to see that. It's not just this small subset of the population anymore that are living out in the woods hugging trees, which we're both kind of secretly tree huggers. Don't tell anyone, but it's going to like the wide stream, which is really cool to see.
So I wanted to go back to even the basics, because juicing gets a bad rap. So I want to talk about juicing, but I also want to let people know, and for you to share, that it's not like you're selling juices. You're selling specific shots. What I've asked you before, have you thought about making it into like an 8-ounce, 10, 12-ounce juice? And then, of course, why is cold pressed better than just what's the alternative? Just like a regular.
Yeah, there's like centrifugal. They're essentially hot juicing.
Yeah, I know, but I want you to tell me.
Yeah. So cold pressing for us is a big deal, because that raw CBD is no longer raw whenever you juice it in a way that heats up the hemp. So heat is what turns raw CBD into regular CBD. And so by cold pressing it, not only do we protect that raw CBD, but there's a ton of other functional compounds in hemp. Things like other raw, what are called phytocannabinoids, or essentially a fancy word that means like active compounds in hemp that are good for your health. Basic things that we all know about, things like vitamins and minerals and chlorophyll and amino acids, and all those things get affected by heat. I think juicing gets a bad rep, one, on a personal level, because it's messy and it takes a lot of time. So people are kind of, if you're living this fast-paced lifestyle, it's a pain in the butt. That's one reason why we juice hemp for people to buy, because juicing hemp, like I said before, will literally tear your home juicer up in a matter of weeks. If you're trying to juice it, you have to be really careful. So I think that's one reason why it gets a bad rep. Another reason why is because a lot of people just can't handle, you drink celery juice, Alice, so you get this, you can handle the green, but a lot of people can't handle how earthy, raw, straight up green juice tastes. And I think, maybe we'll evolve as a society to enjoy those bitters. But I think right now most people are blissfully unaware of how much their cold pressed juice, even from their favorite juice shop, has in terms of sugar content. Like it's
yes, I'm always telling people, I'm like, green juices only. Every single juice place that I go to, I ask, I'm like, is there apple juice? Is there orange juice? I'm like, I don't want any of that.
Yep. Some juices can have as much sugar as a can of Coke, which is like shocking. And the reason why I think that's another reason why, especially people who are like in tune with the wellness community, like it's their lifestyle and their career, they kind of have known that for a while. And that's why they give it a bad rep, and then other people feed off of that. But that being said, juicing has a wonderful list of benefits. Like you get these raw compounds that you don't normally get in higher concentrations in plants. And so when done right, I think it could be extremely healthy. You're missing things like fiber and other things like that. But the thing about it is no one's eating hemp leaves right now. So for hemp, like juicing it was the most clear direction to get as close to the whole plant as possible. Will people be eating hemp leaves and hemp microgreens in their salad someday? Yeah, we hope so. But right now, hemp juice was as close as we could get to the whole plant. So it was the perfect option for getting all those functional compounds out of it.
And why is it in a shot and not in an 8-10 ounce juice?
So that's an interesting story, actually. When we first launched Lumen, we were intending to launch into an 8 ounce. That was, we'd formulated some really good tasting 8 ounce drinks. And when we looked to launch on our Indiegogo, there were a couple things that we had to figure out. How do we make it, how do we get it to the consumer in a fresh and exciting and flavorful way? And the only way that we could ship things to people fresh via like pre-sales on Indiegogo was in a box with ice and all this other stuff. And it didn't really work. We didn't want people to spend money to get an amazing fresh tasting juice, but only get 1 or 2 in this big box with all this packaging. And we were always against, packaging and against sending unnecessary stuff. It's like, how do we keep it as environmentally friendly as possible, but also boost people's health in a fun and exciting way with this amazing new ingredient? And so when we looked at how it could all come together, we realized that hemp is this amazing functional ingredient, makes people feel great. And we would drink it as shots when we were trying to figure out how to formulate it. And so the idea just came about as we were putting everything together for our Indiegogo. It was like, well, why don't we why don't we make it a shot? And it's functional. We can make it taste good. And then it kind of solved a lot of problems for us. It solved the problem of making it, functional and tasty, but also being able to send it to people in a fresh way, but they also get a lot of it. And so then it became this thing where, we could send a smaller box that had more shots. So it's less packaging. And then, consumers got more. So, you as a consumer that wanted to buy Lumen, all of a sudden, instead of what we would have sent as 1 or 2 or 3 juices, now you could get a box of 12 or 24 shots. We could pack more into it, so it became even more functional. And so it just became this evolution as we were, on our entrepreneurial journey to start Lumen of, how do we, the question we always asked ourselves was, how do we do it in an environmentally friendly way, but also in a way that really is exciting and fun and functional and flavorful for the consumer? And shots just happen to be the natural evolution of making it work for the circumstances that we were in. And from there, it just grew. Again, just being persistent and listening to what works, that's what worked. And so we launched into grocery stores with that. We've launched into Whole Foods with that. And it's been exciting. I think people are getting to a point now where sometimes they don't want a full, 8-ounce or 12-ounce juice. Sometimes they're on the run or on the road, or they just finished a workout and they had their shake and they want some anti-inflammatories and an immune booster. They're about to hop on a plane. And instead of downing a whole juice, it's really easy to take a, fun, functionally packed 2-ounce shot. So it just seemed to be kind of a natural evolution, and it worked.
Mm-hmm. Less is more.
Less is more. Exactly.
Yep.
So
do that way. You got so fired up about that. I love that because Yasir and I play this game where we pick up different juices, not necessarily juices, but beverages. And we're guess how much sugar. I challenge anyone listening to this, play that with a friend or a family member next time you're out, grab a beverage and then just ask the other person how much sugar. And I guarantee you over 50% of the time, they're going to be way under.
It's always a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't have to do with just beverages. I mean, you can do it with
yogurt.
Almost anything. And it's kind of astonishing.
There's hidden sugar everywhere. And I just personally myself, I know that I'm more sensitive to sugar, something that's very sugary, whether it's, food, a drink, I just don't like it. And I just know that I gain weight from it. When I'm drinking more juice, if I'm drinking alcohol, which I don't really drink that much anymore, but back when I was drinking a lot, I was I'm gaining a lot of weight because of these liquid calories, but also the sugars were they just weren't really serving me.
Yep. Well, the enemy is not fruit either. It's the enemy is fruit that's been removed from all the fiber, those net carbs. That's the real, the devil's always in the details. And when you take the juice out of the fruit, then the fiber that's in the fruit can no longer keep those sugars from being slowly absorbed in a way that's not going to spike your blood sugar and cause this massive influx of different sugars into your body. So it's important to realize that, sugar is fat doesn't make people fat. Sugar makes people fat, and too much sugar causes metabolic dysfunction, which leads to all these other things. But it's not the fruit necessarily. It's always just, again, it's how we process it as humans. So you have to be really careful how you choose to process stuff.
I just think we're so conditioned to eat sweet things.
Yep. It's a culture. That's for sure. I was just talking to another beverage entrepreneur about that yesterday. He was it's crazy. I just launched into the Midwest and I'm having to make my things way sweeter to sell them there. And it's not, it's
the worst.
It's the worst. He's it's a much bigger conversation. What are you going to do to your company and your vision for the sake of growth? Are you willing to dilute the quality of your product to sell more of it? And where is that fine line? Because if your goal is to help people, then obviously the more people you get to, the more you help. But at what point is the line in the sand drawn where if you cross that line, your product is actually detrimental to people's health or a negative as opposed to a positive? Those are questions that I think companies, it's so weird. Even if you look at Coca-Cola, they started off as a medicinal tonic, and now they're responsible for so much of the disease we have in this country as a single company, which is astonishing to be able to even like point to one company and say this is like millions of people's lives that have taken a downturn because of it. But you have to be really, really careful when you're coming up with anything, any product that you're putting out into the world, because it's people's lives are in your hands.
And it is a difficult question, and there really is no concrete answer, and that answer continues to change constantly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
We're learning a lot more about how these different, a lot, like I said, fat doesn't make people fat, but that's only a thought that's really come to the forefront of conversation over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So like you said, things are changing constantly. Our understanding of just how detrimental sugars and especially processed sugars are to our health. It's like we all knew sugar was bad ever since we were a kid, but no one really knew just how bad, like how connected processed sugar, processed foods, all these things were to our long-term health. We always knew they were bad, but now it's kind of cool seeing the science catch up, because with informed and educated populations, like we can make better, more informed decisions. Maybe we won't grow up to have high blood pressure leading to a stroke because were raised in a different culture than our parents. And like, we're not going to go through the same kind of adverse health events that they went through. And then that's going to allow us, like we were talking before this podcast, that's going to allow us to be 65 or 70 and going on a 20-mile backpacking trip with our grandchildren. Like, these are things that it's going to revolutionize how we live our lives for the rest of our lives. And it's just happening now, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think change happens incrementally. I think it takes a lot of, and most of the time it happens from the grassroots, right? People decide like, oh wait, this isn't really good for me, and then they start, better for you companies with juice and it's going to happen in a lot of different industries, right? Right now it's happening with health and wellness, but over time, everything that we're seeing with technology is going to start to change too, and our relationship's going to change there. So I think as a society, we evolve and we grow, and we slowly start to realize the things that aren't good for us, and then we have to actively choose to be better. And then, like Kris was saying earlier, we have to also choose to be a lighthouse for those around us. And so it's change happens incrementally, but the more that we can push something, individually, and the more that we believe in it, and the more that we can become a lighthouse, the more it'll change.
Mm-hmm. And so I also wanted to touch upon food as fuel versus an indulgence. I think the way that food is marketed to us is very much so an indulgence, but what we should be thinking about the food that we eat is fuel.
At least 90% of the time, I would agree with that. And that's something we talked about in that Immune Reset Challenge. Was I can remember the aha moment for me when I realized how much my psychology had changed when I was cooking up kale and sauteing it. I literally saw it as a brain booster as opposed to a slightly bitter leafy green that I was cooking up and trying to make taste good. I was starting to crave it, and it didn't happen overnight. It took years to get to that point, but it's kind of cool when you see food like that. And on the other hand, you can't completely cut life's indulgences out. So I think humans are so binary, 0-1, black, white, yes, no. And it's hard to see things on a spectrum like most things actually are. Politics, the environment, our health, all these different things. And so I think it's important to make sure that you're pretty far one way on the spectrum. You don't want to be like 50-50 indulgent food and then also paying attention to what you're eating in a healthy way. But I also think it's good every once in a while to have that slice of pecan pie at Thanksgiving or whatever.
Yeah. And so what are some of your favorite superfoods aside from hemp?
Ashwagandha. I love ashwagandha. We used to have a shot with ashwagandha, but along that line of things being too green, we actually had to discontinue that shot because it didn't sell too well because it tasted too green. So we'll come back to that ingredient someday. Really good for stress management early on in the campaign. What's that?
It's very bitter.
Yeah, very, very bitter. My current favorite outside of hemp, though, is lion's mane mushroom. I love lion's mane.
I was going to say, I was gifted some reishi spores by an amazing company called Two Soul, and that's been my go-to for the past almost 2 months now. I've been adding it to all of my smoothies, and so that's been my go-to for now. And I'm almost running out, so I'll have to get some more. But I'm just really fascinated by mushrooms. I know we use them in one of our shots, and I'd say that's my go-to superfood for now.
Yes, the healing power of mushrooms. I know that lion's mane is very much so a brain booster, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have that in our shot we just renamed it. It was called Bright Brain, but to make it super clear for people, we're calling it Pure Focus. And that shot has lion's mane mushroom and also shiitake mushroom, which is also surprisingly a great brain booster. And those both come from an amazing company called Whole Sun Wellness. They're actually developing the United States' first commercial organic mushroom farm, and I think it's Colorado. It's really cool to see. So a lot of these functional mushrooms are grown outside of the country, and they're one of the first that's leading the charge. And so we're really excited to be partnered with them. They've got really high quality standards. But lion's mane, man, that whole blend of functional compounds we have in that shot. As an entrepreneur, you have to be on point all the time. And I don't even have like a family yet, so I can only imagine how much that would change things. But balancing my personal life, my romantic life with my partner, my business life, all these things that, especially in the middle of a global pandemic, it's like it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And so whatever you can do to help keep you on point, on the cutting edge, pushing at 110% without feeling like you're pushing at 110%, like having a healthy stress level, those are things that I look for as an entrepreneur. And lion's mane is a really great superfood for that.
And have you guys always eaten healthy since you started the company?
Yeah.
So talk to me about the evolution. Talk to me about the evolution of you're just eating whatever, and then all of a sudden you're like, ooh, let me eat more kale. Let me eat more just fruits, vegetables, less processed food.
It's funny you say evolution because I imagine ourselves, Yasir and I both, being like, if you look at that chart of the evolution of man, like I could see us both still as hunched over monkeys. Like it wasn't that long ago that we became bipedal and like walking humans on that little evolutionary chart from monkey to man.
Yeah, I mean, it was really a discovery. I think for me growing up, food was healthy, but also, I mean, it's bad, but you'd see kids with Coca-Cola and baby bottles, right? And so, the starting point was so far off, and it was just ingrained in these habits of, when you're hungry and you need something quick, grab some fast food, and like it's okay. And again, food was just this fuel source, and it didn't matter what you're putting in, and so not all calories are created equal, and we're eating a lot of. I was eating a lot of empty calories, and I think that's been a blessing of being on this Lumen journey. I think this journey of discovery and this journey of creating, health and wellness products has opened for both of us the possibilities with food and how food really is fuel. And so it's been a big shift. And I think where we are today compared to where we were, even several months ago is absolute night and day. We used to eat out a lot, and now we cook almost every single meal here at the house. And so that becomes the first big evolution where you're starting to really realize, what am I eating? Because you start to buy it and you start to have to pick those foods out. And then you go from, for me personally, it went from being able to cook one meal to being able to cook several meals. And so it becomes this discovery process of, I figured out how to make the salad and the pasta and the fish and then you start to realize like, okay, well, am I eating too much meat? Am I eating too many carbs? And so it's definitely a lot better today than it was, at the beginning of the year and several years ago. And I think it's just a constant evolution, and it's breaking out of those habits, right? There's so many things happening in the world, being a startup founder, having, limited hours, working lots of hours. And so there's days where you compromise. There's days where you're like, you know what, I'm not going to try to skip a meal, but I'm just going to eat, whatever I can now. And I know that I have to make up for it later. And it's just this balance and this active tug of war. I know Kris is a lot better at it than I am.
I was going to say, I think I helped extend Yasir's lifespan by at least 5 years.
Absolutely. Maybe I'd say 15. Just super fortunate, I think, that the world has put us on this path, and that, we're continuing to enjoy it every single day.
The thing with healthy food is like, if you're someone like I was fortunate enough to have parents that knew how to eat healthy, but also like a normal American, they also didn't really understand the dangers of sugar. So it's not like I went from one extreme to the other. I did grow up eating 4 Pop-Tarts for breakfast every morning, which was an insane amount of calories, empty calories and sugar. When I look at it, that was like my go-to. I felt amazing. I felt like I was on crack, which it pretty much was. And although I don't know what that feels like, just to add that in there, I'm only imagining. But the cool part about it was I can remember cooking with my parents growing up every once in a while and like learning how to make meals together. It's just like we didn't have that understanding, like most Americans still don't, of what food was in terms of a healthcare tool. And so like when I left college, I was vegetarian for a little while. I was vegan for a little while. And now I'm what I would call like a flexitarian, like eat responsibly raised, good for the environment meat, which exists. Shout out to Force of Nature Meats, which is like one of my favorite meat companies out there. So it was this like evolution of understanding like, oh, it's not necessarily prescribing to the specific set diet or specific, category of foods to pay attention to. It was really just cutting out processed foods. And if you can't completely cut them out, at least limiting it to 1 out of whatever, every 20 or 30 meals. And then cutting out processed sugar. And really, if you just like follow those 2 things, cutting out processed foods, like your health will quickly follow suit. There's so many more details involved with that. So I would recommend anyone that's super interested in it, like reach out to a functional medicine doctor and start going to one of those instead of like a normal general practitioner, your normal family doctor, because a functional medicine doctor has all these great tools at their disposal where they can do like genetic tests to see. Surprisingly, a lot of people don't know this. There's like gluten intolerance where you have maybe celiac disease and you really can't have it. But there's 2 genes responsible, and you may not have celiac disease, but you could be like sensitive to gluten where you have one of the 2 genes. But like you're never going to know that unless you go to a doctor. But a lot of these underlying symptoms like allergies or headaches or
eczema,
skin, a lot of things related to the skin. They could be related to the fact that you're sensitive to gluten, but like most people suffer from these conditions anyway. And I heard one doctor say, you don't know how good you could feel until you actually feel that way. Like once you've made the change. And a lot of these ways that we feel as a society are just quote unquote normal. Like having eczema is somewhat normalized. I mean, you go to the doctor and get a pill or a cream for it. But it's somewhat normal. It's like having allergies, like pretty normalized, like having gut issues, pretty normalized. And so all these things, once you've realized that you can make these some really kind of simple changes, and don't beat yourself up. They do take years to make in terms of like a complete lifestyle change. But for me, like the big awakening was just looking at how much sugar was in stuff and cutting out processed foods.
And what is your favorite recipe that you've been cooking during quarantine?
Ooh, man, I make this like variant on P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps. I use this regeneratively raised ground pork. And so to add to what that even means, obviously everyone knows what ground pork is. But regeneratively raised means these pigs are raised in a way that mimics the way like wild pigs would live. And so it makes them more nutrient dense. And for instance, like they haven't studied the pork that comes from this company, but the beef that comes from this company, for every pound of beef you buy, it's negative 1.3 pounds of carbon removed from the atmosphere. So it's actually like carbon negative or climate beneficial meat. So I buy this ground pork and I make this variant on P.F. Chang's lettuce wraps. And those are really, really good.
I've been a big fan. I make a veggie plate. And so it's it goes in the oven. It gets baked in like a big glass pan. And it's, just a bunch of veggies with some fish inside too. So, potatoes, green beans, corn, onions. I add a little bit of tomato sauce. And so it's good because it lasts a couple days. And then also one of the things that I've learned is you're not supposed to count the calories. You're supposed to count the colors. And so one of the things that I really like about the veggie plate is not only is it very flavorful, but it's also got a lot of different colors. And so, you get all my veggies, and I also get some meat from the fish. So that's probably my favorite plate right now. And then there's some other, Middle Eastern plates that I make every now and then, but that's the one for now.
Never underestimate the power of an omelet too. that's like such an easy, quick go-to whenever you're a busy person. And like, you can grow a lot of the herbs and the kale and stuff and tomatoes on your rooftop garden or like your patio garden or your backyard garden, which is really cool, really fun.
Yeah, this is true. And what do you say to people when they think eating healthy means expensive?
No way. Not for us.
Check.
We've actually saved. So making the transition from eating out, and because eating out healthy could maybe be potentially expensive. I think it is. But eating out fast food it's eating in and cooking your own meals and then being healthy, actually way healthier than eating out, has actually saved us money. So when I've looked at my expenses over the last couple months, I actually have more savings than I've ever had because of the fact that I've been able to find healthy foods and just cook them myself. And so I would say it's a myth. It really is. And so if you take the challenge on to, want to become healthier and also enjoy the act of learning how to cook and, cook for yourself, then you'll realize that it's actually cheaper and puts you in a better position to continue to not just grow, your own foods, but also grow, personally, I think with your diet. And then you become, again, a lighthouse, right? You become a beacon to others to show that it really is just another myth out there. It's actually, I've personally found that it's cheaper.
Yeah. At least we sell us from Kale and Chocolate or Once Upon a Food Story podcast. She serves on the board of the environmental working group. And I didn't realize they had put this out there, but she told me that there's this guide it's called like Eating Healthy on a Budget or something like that from the environmental working group, EWG. So people can definitely check that out. I'd recommend buying things in bulk whenever you can. And then sticking to like stuff when it's fresh and seasonal, it's going to be cheaper. But whenever you buy in bulk and you cook in bulk, it's a lot less expensive. I always cook like 4 meals at a time and then just eat leftovers. But even ordering the meat from that Force of Nature company, if you order online in bulk, you can get a really good deal on this like carbon, this really healthy, more nutrient dense, climate friendly meat is less expensive than buying organic, like regular organic meat here in California.
And I think that just by hearing your stories, I hope people will be inspired, because typically people don't really equate entrepreneur to being healthy.
I would say in the beginning, we were healthy before Lumen. At least I was healthy before Lumen, and then Lumen hit, and like my health routine kind of went out the window. Like stress went way up. Maxing out credit cards definitely will take a toll on your mental health. And one of the first things to go are like your really great habits on your diet or your exercise. And Yasir, thank God, pulled us into the gym, and we started going to the gym on a daily basis. And you realize that you kind of have to keep those as a foundation to be able to succeed. Because like I feel better now than I ever have in my entire life, minus like when I was a really young kid and it seemed like you could do whatever and be super healthy, feel super healthy. But like energy levels, brain fog, stress, like all these things, they still exist and they come in waves. But the thing about it is you have the tools in your toolbox to handle those things, and you feel a lot more resilient as a person once you've built these habits as a foundation for your life.
Yeah, I've always felt that whenever we're going through a very tough time, it's the world trying to teach us a lesson. And early on in our business, I think the lesson that we needed to learn is that we'd given up the foundation and the fundamentals to being successful. You can't be successful if you're not sleeping right, if you're not exercising, if you're not eating well. And so as soon as we started to reincorporate some of those fundamentals, everything started to show back up for us. And so we realized that being on this entrepreneurial journey is, being a startup founder, yes, it's difficult, but every time it gets more and more difficult, being in tune to trying to understand what is the lesson that I'm needing to learn so that I can make it through this time, and really doing that self-reflection and then finding the takeaway, focusing on it and growing. And I think, like Kris has said, you realize that these fundamentals really are, how you grow your business. Because as long as you can feel good and look good, and mentally you're clear. And like we said, it comes and goes, but as long as you focus on the fundamentals, it gives you so much more resilience as a human being to make it through the hard times and continue to grow through the good. So I I think that's a good takeaway for people is, when things get really, really hard, it's only that the world is trying to teach you a lesson so that you can make it through to the next stage of your life.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to share, if you guys are willing, how much do you spend a week on your groceries?
Oh yeah, totally. It kind of varies depending on what else I want to spend money on in the month. If I want to go buy a new backpacking backpack, then I'm going to spend less on food, just because right now we're a small company. We only have one full-time employee, but we pay him more than we pay ourselves. So we don't have that much extra spending money right now. I'd say if I really wanted to, and I have done this in the past, I could spend $60 to $70 a week and survive. But I would say on average, I'm probably spending closer to $100 or $120 a week. And that has some indulgences in there too, what I would call indulgences, things like fresh fruit from the farmer's market, maybe a fresh peach or a bar of nice dark chocolate, or I do drink a cup of coffee in the morning. So maybe I buy a $17 bag of single origin organic coffee as opposed to the $10 bag of store brand organic coffee or something like that. So it definitely is possible to spend $70 a week on organic, clean food, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're actually trying to set a record.
Yeah, no, I think I'm anywhere in between the $400 and $600 a month, and I don't think about it too much. I just I watch it in terms of my budget, but I buy the things that I want, and I buy the things that I like, and the things that are healthy, and the things that I'd like to cook, and that's just where it happens to fall. And I think naturally I've found that it's cheaper than the alternatives that I was at before. So.
Yeah, that's less than $5 a meal on average, $100 a week, I think.
Yeah, and again, it was never the intention to calculate it. It was always the intention of
for you.
Yeah, for me.
I had spreadsheets for a while. I was so curious. I was trying to figure out the mechanics. I was how much money can you spend and save while also eating? I had all the way down to the spices. How many meals could I make with the spices? And was that a penny or 2 pennies? And I didn't let it get out of hand. Luckily, I had sane friends around me that were "You're not going to do this forever, are you?" And I was no, no, right? I did it for probably 4 of my favorite meals. And you can cook a good organic meal even with meat, which is the expensive part that's good for the planet. You can cook a good organic meal for less than $3 to $4 a meal. It's definitely doable, especially if you're cooking in bulk and buying in bulk and doing all the things that we recommended.
Yeah, I never really thought about it. I just found that I was saving more money doing the things that I ended up enjoying more, and I was feeling better in the process. So, I think it's very doable and on a very limited budget. So I don't think that should be a deterrent for anybody out there. And I think a part of it too was we made a commitment, to really look at how much we were eating out. And I think it's kind of like the sugar thing. Once you realize how much sugar is just in stuff that you consume, you realize whoa, this is way too much. And then you really change it. And I think that's the same thing. It's just a period of self-discovery of I think a lot of times we don't realize how habitual our life has become. We wake up and we probably step out of bed with the same foot. We probably brush the same tooth, and so a lot of these things are habits that are just ingrained over time because of the environments that we're in and the people that we're around. And so taking moments of self-reflection every now and then to realize wait, where am I? How did I get here? And how do I start to change to become a better person, I think are key. And that was just one of those periods that we went through. And again, same thing with the finances. I never really looked at personally never really looked at okay, what is this going to change? It was just a process of oh, wait, we probably should. And Kris was one of the sparks for that. It's wait, let's look at how much we're eating now, where we're eating, where's that food coming from? And then you realize wait, how did I get here? And what was that process? And then you start to realize oh, it's just a part of being a startup and part of being busy. And you realize that it's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's part of being human. We're not perfect. And then it's okay, well, I want to make an active, decision to change my habits. And then after that, it gets really easy. It's okay, well, let me go to the grocery store. Let me see what's out there. And it's this discovery process. And then through that process, I realized oh, wait, I actually am saving money and it actually is pretty affordable. And so I think it also just stems from that taking a moment every now and then to look at where am I today? How did I get here? Where do I want to go? And how do I get there? And it's actually a fun process.
Yeah, COVID, I think, has opened a lot of people's eyes to it. Especially if you're using things like Grubhub or Uber Eats, it's that's even more expensive. If you start thinking,
expensive. Like I've always, like I probably spend around, let's say $70-$80 a week mixing in organic and non-organic items. And there are some processed foods in there, like all that type of stuff. But when you start cooking at home, and especially if you're cooking with like, fresh vegetables, even frozen vegetables, and just cooking healthy, you do start to see a shift. And I always know that I can cook something faster than delivery. And when I start looking at the delivery of like, delivery never tastes as good. And during COVID, it tastes so much worse because the people who are making the food and delivering the food, they're like stressed.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think about that. I mean, like that's the cool part about this whole experience we're going through. Like needless to say, there's a ton of sadness and extreme despair for a lot of people who are suffering the worst from COVID. And not only that, but people who are stuck at home and living in places that are food deserts. Like that's a whole another story where it's like you don't even have access to grab these types of foods to stay healthy right now. But for people who are fortunate enough to have access to this kind of stuff, I feel like it has been an awakening for people because you have more time to learn how to cook and you have more time to learn these new recipes. And then when you start thinking about things like, oh shoot, that $22 burrito that only was one meal that I got through Grubhub, that's 7 meals if I cooked it at home. That's insane.
It is
3 days of
insane.
eating.
And it's just, I think it's something that I tell people that when you're cooking, try not to cook if you're angry or stressed or anxious, because it really does affect how the food turns out. I mean, energy is transferred in the cooking process. And what that actually looks like is cooking with care. Maybe you burn something, maybe you overseason, underseason. Those are all things that come into play depending on your mood.
Yeah, who doesn't pour more syrup on their pancakes when they're not feeling frustrated?
Okay. So I wanted to ask what your morning and evening routines are like. I know it's something that you really spoke about during the Immune Reset Challenge, and people know that I love rituals and routines as well. And I enjoy learning about what other people do.
First thing I do in the morning is make my bed, which I like that a lot. I thought that was kind of stupid at the beginning when, you always hear people say like, oh, if you wake up and make your bed, like first thing you do in the morning is accomplish something, like you get a gold on. And then I started doing it and I was like, oh, wow, this is so weird how something so simple makes such a big difference in how you feel in the morning. So I make my bed, have a cup of coffee, and I feel like it's funny talking to you personally, Alice, because I feel like I'm repeating things that you well already know because you were part of that Immune Reset Challenge. But thanks for asking the question anyway. Suffered through hearing twice. I'm a big believer in just doing something that you find motivating in the morning. Like it doesn't matter if it's reading or meditating or working out or watching an inspirational video. Like just do something inspirational in the morning. So for me, recently it went from reading to watching like instructional slash like hobby videos on like backpacking and outdoors stuff, because I've been doing a lot more of that recently. So I get to kind of daydream in the morning and imagine what I'm going to do in my free time outside of work and like see what kind of gear I want to get and places I want to go visit. And then of course, like cooking a solid breakfast. I've been eating a lot of overnight oats with no sweeteners other than like fresh fruit or frozen fruit actually that I heat up. And that's really my main morning routine. I definitely don't check email or like check anything related to work. I usually wake up about 2 hours before I need to start working. So that's 2 hours that I literally have to just spend on myself, and anywhere between like an hour to 2 hours. And part of that too is I've got a patio garden going of a bunch of kale and tomatoes and bunch onions and peppers. And I go up there and take care of that in the morning too.
Yeah, my morning routine's different. I think we all live together, so we found ways to, build our morning routines separately. And so for me, it's always been, I wake up and I can hear people kind of rustling around and getting their morning started. And I usually tend to stay in my room. I'll make my bed and just sit and check in with myself. How am I feeling today? What are my goals for the day? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling anxious? And just address that. So I take some time to just be with myself. And then before I come downstairs or get my day started, I like to be completely ready. So, you brush my teeth, change. And so by the time when I'm down, I don't have to go up for anything else. And so that's making sure that, like, before I leave my room, I'm ready to conquer the day. So I've already come to terms with everything that I'm feeling, and I'm charged up and good to go.
Can I add something to that real quick? You just saying that, because we are roommates, made me realize that that's actually a really good tip for all the people working from home right now during COVID, is like, before you go into that place of work, wherever that is for your home, like, just act like you're going into the office. Like, be ready. Don't have to go back and brush your teeth or change clothes or whatever. Like, before you walk into that place of wherever you're going to be doing your work for the day, like, just be ready.
Exactly. No, and I love it. It changes the entire dynamic, because then you don't come downstairs with anything left behind, right? You're not coming downstairs and being like, oh, well, I got to go up and like grab that thing here in a little bit. It's everything's done. Everything's taken care of. The moment I put my first foot on that step to come downwards, I'm ready to go anywhere the world needs me to go from that step forward. And so, from there, I come downstairs. I usually like to have a coffee. It's ritual. I like the flavor, and it's a good way to start the day. And from there, we have our, usually have our morning meetings as a team. And then I like to start my water intake. So making sure that I'm getting enough water, staying hydrated, just because I was always chronically dehydrated. I never knew how much water my body was supposed to intake. And so that's the one thing that recently I've been working on, is just making sure that I get enough water throughout the day. And so it makes me feel really good to start that early on. So I have my cup of coffee with my water. And then once our morning meeting is done, I usually like to leave the house, go on a walk, call family. And it's just another meditative thing where, my body still hasn't fully energized and been ready for the day. So it's a way for me to get my blood flowing, go outside, get some fresh air, and then I'm back in. And from then onwards, it's, foot to the throttle and just really pushing for the day and enjoying the journey. So that's usually my morning. And then obviously breakfast and things like that. But my morning is just checking in, making sure I feel good. By the time I come downstairs, I'm ready to go for the day. We do our morning meetings, and then I get out and just get my blood flowing and then get to it.
I'd say my morning routine is a lot more put together than my evening routine. Like, my evening routine is kind of like all over the place. It depends on the day. That's something I definitely could improve on a lot more. I think it's been off too, because I haven't been exercising as much, which is something I used to do in the evenings. And so, like, that would help me fall asleep a little bit easier. But I've been doing a lot of like driving out to Palm Springs where my partner lives, and staying here for work or working late. And so, I don't know, we're all human. That's definitely something I need to improve and work on.
Yeah. So what's your evening routine like?
It really depends on the day. I think this is where the startup journey kind of takes over. Sometimes for my evenings, it's, some days are longer than others. And so just depending on how calls get structured, sometimes I'm on the phone really late in the afternoon. But before I go to bed, I definitely like to just do the same thing I do in the morning, where it's just check out. Like, okay, if I haven't been able to get something done today, or haven't been able to get something accomplished, like, okay, that's the reality. How am I going to, fix it? How am I going to deal with it tomorrow? But I try not to carry anything into sleep. So I either write it down, I make a note, I put it into my calendar, I make a reminder. So all the things that I didn't get done, all the things that I need to do, all the things that, are loose ends that need to get tied, I make sure to deal with all of that. So even if my day does run a little longer into the evenings, I take some time to wind all of that down. Usually I do get a good workout in and a run, so I'm pretty exhausted to come later into the evening. So I just want to make sure that even though I'm physically and mentally exhausted, I get everything off of my mind. It just helps me sleep a little bit better. And then just making sure to take those, last 30 to 40 minutes before bed to just not think about much, whether it's check in on family. We have a family group chat, and I'm, not fortunate enough to be able to constantly be engaging in there. So just take some time to see what everybody's doing and respond to some of those messages, and just take my mind off of work. I think it's very consuming to be a part of a startup, and it's good to keep your mental health in check. And so I think that's really my evening routine, is taking everything that I haven't been able to get done and just putting it aside, finding ways to put it in a safe place where I can get back to it, and checking in on the things that could be like a nice little boost, a nice little recharge before I go to bed, things that are exciting, things that I've wanted to read. Sometimes I'll bookmark little articles and things that I haven't gotten to read throughout the day. So I'll read those before I go to bed, and then It's finding ways to wind down, making sure I don't, expose myself to too much light. So, turning off lights, turning off blinds, and just really preparing for bed so that I can have a good night's sleep, because rest is so important. And I feel like it only supercharges me for the next day. And so I wake up, I know what I need to get done. I go through my morning routine and I'm back at it. So, just making sure I wind down the proper way. And I've found that it makes me feel a lot better, and I'm much more well rested.
And do you guys have a quote or a mantra that you refer often to?
Yeah, my father always, this is like a pretty basic one, but my father always said it, and I think about it all the time. If it were easy, everyone would do it. And it's so simple, but it makes so much sense because you could apply it to any part of your life. Like if you're someone that's interested in self-improvement or just whatever, any kind of improvement, whether it's your personal life, your family life, business life, that can be applied to all parts of your life. And so thanks, Dad. Constantly trying to be better, but it's so true.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I got one from my dad, and we talk about how much they've been an influence in our lives. But he used to always say, "The harder you work, the luckier you get." And so that's one of those that I try not to burn out, obviously. But we've been very fortunate to have a lot of doors open for us, and so I think it's just a consequence of working hard, being passionate, having the right intentions, and so.
I've been drinking the immunity hemp juice shots for a couple months now, as I won a 3-month supply through that Instagram challenge where I met Kris and Yasir. And it's really been something that I look forward to. It's part of my morning routine, and there's just so many great nutrients and benefits of hemp juice that I think I'll be continuing to drink them well into the winter and next year. If you decide to try Lumen, I'd love to know what you think, and if you're inspired to eat a bit healthier in the coming months. Do you have a friend that needs to feel a little bit more inspired about eating healthy and maybe has questions about hemp? Send them this episode. And if you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Kris and Yasir, rate this podcast 5 stars. As always, I'd love to know how I can support you, so reach out, email, Instagram, and know that I'm always here to support you. And for those who want a one-on-one spiritual mentorship, check the show notes and apply.